Hi, this is Dr. Marlene Midelis, physical therapist, and this is Pediatric Telehealth Coffee Hour. I will be interviewing someone at least once a week to bring you value on your telehealth journey. Today I have Christine Robenalt, physical therapist, and she's been doing telehealth since way before the pandemic. She has a lot of experience and a lot to offer. I actually met Christina by joining her Facebook group. It's called Colorado Early Intervention Telehealth Interest Group, and you don't have to live in Colorado to join it. So look it up. We can set up the link on the comments. And then after I joined her group, because I was interested in telehealth, we got together and she actually did a telehealth visit for my son that had ankle pain. And it was a little bit crazy because I had both my boys with me, but she was great, and she taught me some massage techniques to use on him, and his ankle pain went away. So thank you so much for joining us today, Christine, and let's go ahead and get started. Can you tell us how you got started in pediatric telehealth and when?
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Marlene, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here and share what I know. So I started in pediatric telehealth in 2013. Prior to that, I had some telehealth experience as early as 2010 at the VA in Denver. We would see people for their MOVE program, which is the weight loss program. I was in Denver and I was treating people in Pueblo or Durango. So that was the first experience I had with telehealth. Although that was basically, we had to be in this big room with this fancy camera, and it was definitely not accessible to the general public at that time. In 2013, after I had my second son, I had been looking at different ways to work less outside of the home. And I came across a company called Therapy Source, which is still out there today. And they had a job position for a school-based therapist who would see people online. And the woman reached out to me and she said, well, do you know anybody who has their Colorado educator's license and who would be willing to work online? And I said, well, I don't know anybody else, but I would. And I happened to have had my Colorado educator's license at the time because I had worked in the schools previously. So I just kind of started. They gave you very little training, like about a 2-hour training. I mean, it was brand new. And so everything I pretty much figured out on my own at that point. I went on to looking at different companies after I worked there for a year who might also be interested in doing this. So there are other companies out there, Presence Learning, Tiny Eye, eLuma. And so at the time, physical therapy wasn't really something that a lot of those companies wanted to take on. They were doing it with speech, they were doing it with social work, occupational therapy a little bit, but nobody wanted to wrap their head around physical therapy. And so I was able to find a company who was willing to take that chance with me. So I started working with them, and that was great, where I saw the bulk of my visits. And then I was also working for in-home care at the time for pediatrics here in Denver. And one of my superiors went on to a different company. And so I followed her there and brought telehealth to that company. And they asked me to be the director of telehealth for them, which just meant that I was putting out their program, kind of monitoring their training and monitoring how the therapists were doing with their visits. So that led to a lot of other opportunities for me, but that's kind of how I got started.
And is that where you co-authored some provider training? Is that where that occurred?
That's right. So then I was invited to come down to Pueblo to take part of a statewide training program where some women who were doing research in speech and audiology from Utah were present from NCHAM. And so NCHAM, NCHAM, it's the National Center for Hearing and I'd have to look up all the, but they have a lot of resources for practitioners and information for families, and they've been doing it the longest. Speech language pathology and ASHA have been proponents of telepractice, teleintervention for a very long time. So I think that the most body of evidence as far as research and patient satisfaction is going to come from that speech and language area. But just another name to look up if you're an occupational therapist, Jana Kaysen out of the University of Kentucky. She has a lot of information as well, and has done a lot of research there. So there's definitely research out there, and we've been compiling it since 2011, 2012. And this is just coming now because of the impact of the coronavirus. We need to move to this now, but all along, proponents of telehealth have been trying to push the needle forward with, a lot of maybe fear from the public, or thinking that it's not the same as or not equivalent to an in-person session. And I think once you experience it, you have a different perspective on it. So yes.
Yeah, I've even noticed during my telehealth sessions, this one parent where I felt like in person he wasn't really connecting with what I was saying, and he does better via telehealth. So I thought that was pretty interesting because everybody has different learning styles. So he actually he does a lot better and listens to my cue better over the computer.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all. I have had parents who live no more than 5 miles from my home choose telehealth over me coming in person.
And you're also a business owner. So can you tell us what led you to want to create your own business? And that is Sweet Pea Pediatric Wellness, right?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing for me for being a business owner was just to have more flexibility and freedom so that I could be with my 3 kids, and not have to be working so much out of the home. So Sweet Pea Pediatric Wellness started as a way to, because I'm a certified infant massage instructor, to be able to teach those classes privately.
Awesome.
And yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's one way, whether you are receiving therapeutic intervention or not, that all parents can interact with their child in a different way. It's one of the 5 love languages. In that book, if you've read the 5 love languages for children, physical touch is one of their love buckets. So I think I can make an argument that providing child massage or infant massage actually accomplishes all 5 of your love buckets. You can fill up all 5 of them while you're giving your child a massage. And so I wanted a way to do that. And with my background in telehealth, I knew I could do that online or in person. Now I'm going to get further training in MNRI, reflex integration. And again, I'm in the training process right now, but I feel that because it can positively impact so many children who may not necessarily qualify for therapy services, my private company is a way to offer that to families who, even though they may not normally come to PT.
And then just a fun question, how many telehealth visits do you think that you've done since you started telehealth?
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night since you told me my questions in advance. And so based off of the number of kids I had on my caseload for the school system and the length of the school year, and I estimate I probably have done somewhere between 300 and 400 telehealth sessions. So, I'm sorry?
I'm so glad we have you on this interview today with all that experience.
Yeah, definitely. There have been some good sessions and there have been some not so good sessions, or things that I've been able to, take away and make different the next time. But I think that's the same for in person too. The biggest takeaway really, and I know that if you've never done a telehealth session before, this is, or maybe difficult for you to kind of conceptualize, is it's go back to what you would do in person. Go back to that in-person session, because first and foremost, that's our ethical and moral obligation, legal obligation to provide an equivalent service. Now, I make that distinction between the same visit or doing exactly the same thing and equivalent, because I think like you mentioned with the dad that you were working with, it maybe it's not the exact same thing that you're doing, but it's the equivalent service, meaning you're still progressing the child toward their goals. You as a therapist, no matter what therapy provider you are using your skills of observation, you being able to use your skills to assess what's going on and why you're going to recommend the next activity, or why you're going to recommend that the parent does X, Y, or Z next. And that is, I was talking with my son who's 12, and I was trying to like ask him to think about like his teacher in school. Like if the student wasn't getting the information, would the teacher just let the kid walk out of the room and that's the end of it? Like, no, we would invite them back, and the teacher's role is not just to teach the material, but to try to figure out where that student is and work them up from there. And that doesn't require the teacher to be sitting right next to you. So I think we can like kind of help us understand this as online video visits and understand how effective it is if we can start with what we know. When things feel new and different and we don't have a reference for exactly this, people can feel very uneasy about it. But if you can start with what you actually know and experience, and you can kind of understand the benefit from that, and then start to have your own experiences with telehealth, I think you quickly see the benefit.
And can you describe one of the most challenging, something that just over the 400 something telehealth visits you've done, the most challenging one, and what strategies you used during that session to help give the best you could?
I'm thinking of 3 students in particular. Interesting enough, so I worked for Colorado Virtual Academy, and before they did sessions online, they would just contract with different outpatient providers, and they would send the children who were getting schooled virtually, but they would send them to an outpatient clinic, which typically isn't allowed when you're receiving school-based therapy, but in this setting, that was what they had because they were a virtual school. So I had the great fortune to be able to work with these twin boys in Colorado in person. And then about a year and a half later, they ended up on my caseload online. So I had a really good kind of understanding. I already worked with these boys in the clinic. And now 2 years later, I'm seeing them again in the virtual space. So I knew kind of their limitations and kind of where they might get stuck or what kind of threw them over the edge. And so when I saw them online, their caregiver, their grandmother actually, did not feel comfortable with the technology. So really, I did not have a lot of support from her in the virtual session. So everything I had to run through these 9-year-old boys. And they would on occasion leave the room. On occasion something wouldn't go right with the camera, so I'd have to walk them through it. So that was challenging in itself, that I had to kind of keep their attention. I knew that they struggled with this anyway in the clinic, and what could I do to help manage that online. And so it does take a lot more preparation for some visits. So that's what I learned. I learned that I needed to prepare for the visit better, meaning I needed to have a visual schedule for these guys. So you could make a visual schedule a bunch of different ways, but I chose to take Google images of like little clip art of what we were doing if we were jumping or treasure hunt. And so I would write out the word, and then I would put the visual icon there, and I would have the 3 or 4 things. And then as we completed them, to really increase that participation and to keep them attending to the task, I'd have them come back to the screen and annotate and line it out. And I would give them the choice of what color they wanted to use or whatever to help improve how much control I could give the child so that they didn't feel like they needed to take all of the control and leave.
And when they did leave the room, did you have to how did you get grandma to bring them back, or how did you get them to come back to the room?
So that's a really good question. So in that case, I had my cell phone available, and it was an agreement between grandma and I that, she kind of knew that if the child left the room that they needed to come back, but I might text grandma and just mention, this is what happened. Can you bring them back or whatever? And that didn't actually happen that often. But I had to have that plan kind of in place of what to do.
So my next question was about, what strategies to tackle a kid with a lot of behavior issues, but you did give some strategies there. Are there any other strategies that you want to share with us that you've used?
Yeah. And again, I would say, what strategies do you use in person? So if I think about what strategies I use in person, I make sure that I give the child one clear instruction, very clear information of what I want that child to do. If I'm kind of all wishy-washy or I don't give a very clear instruction in person, I'm also not going to get very good engagement from that child. Secondly, if the child is not able to engage with you directly on the screen, then don't do that. Then we do need to have a learning coach or a caregiver or somebody who's going to be a willing participant for you, someone who can better communicate the information. This happened for me too online. I worked with a boy when I was licensed to work in Arizona, here in Colorado, in the schools. I worked with a family whose son was autistic, and he did not like me to be on the screen. Him seeing me on the screen set him off. So I had to work with the mom and let the mom know, okay, I need to show you something. So she would turn the camera away and let me show her that. And then she could put the camera back so I would be able to see what her son did. And so that, in person, maybe that isn't throwing him off. Is me being there isn't throwing him out of that state of calm and alert, but online it did. So we had to think of a strategy so that I could still see the child and that the parent could still have access to what I'm doing if she needed to see it, but just not constantly. So other than that, I would make a clear space for where they need to be. A very clearly defined, this is your location. So when the parent is saying, come back, Johnny, come back here, they know exactly where they need to go. Get out a yoga mat. I've had parents maybe, fold a blanket into a smaller section so that if the child does move off the blanket, they're not moving completely off the screen. You could use some painter's tape and draw an X. I know, so for speech therapists or for occupational therapists, it may be more appropriate to have the child up in a high chair. The other thing is, if you are giving instruction to the family, would you in person expect that the child sit there and listen? Or if you were in clinic or in home, they would be running around the house doing whatever they wanted to do. So I think you have to be okay with that online, and that the parent needs to be okay with that. And I think the biggest thing there is to just give the parent permission to let the child go.
Right, yeah. And I know a neat technique that you use with my son that I thought was creative, because you were looking at his ankles and how he was standing, was putting like a blanket down that was a solid color so you could really see on the screen how his feet looked. And I thought that was really a good idea too.
Yeah, if possible, a solid color would be preferred. And same thing with your clothing. You as the therapist really should have a pretty minimal background and no patterns on, no sparkly jewelry. Here I have my necklace, I can put that away. But nothing that's going to be making a lot of extra noise as far as feedback. And you can kind of, I'll get up and demonstrate something for the family, and I know that if I'm wearing a sweater or if I'm wearing a baggier shirt, that they can't see very well. So not that everybody needs to be wearing leggings and stretch pants, but a firmer fitting or not loose top and pants would be easier for the family to see you model it.
And probably contrast in your background, like you were saying, so your clothes don't blend in with your background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if I have a pretty dark couch back there, so wearing something of a lighter color is going to help them see that against the couch for sure. And you know, if that's not something that comes to your mind the first couple of times, I think your parent will tell you, I can't quite see you.
You're figuring it out. Yeah.
And that's okay too. There are definitely lots of lists and checklists that you can go online and find. But again, for me anyway, until I've had that direct experience, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what the most important features or must-dos are. So give yourself some grace and let yourself, practice. Get online with a friend, get online with another clinician, a family member, and run through a mock session. I did that with my brother and his twins. When they were about 8 months old, we recorded some really nice sessions, and it was nice for me because actually the one twin did not qualify for early intervention services, and her sister was so much further ahead. So we had the one twin who was a little bit delayed, but not delayed enough to get services, and then her sister was maybe a month and a half ahead of where she should. So the parents felt very like, what's going on with this little girl? So I was able to help them out, my brother and my sister-in-law, with the virtual visits.
I had done, my nephew, my niece, she has a little son, the one that I posted the wellness physical therapy visit on. So he's like, oh, I can't make it. And I know he's doing great, but I want tips. And I was like, oh, let's hop on a call. But I could definitely see when I was, I don't know if you saw it, but I was trying to demonstrate, like, when trying to get the baby to commando crawl and like kind of give the baby input on the bottom of his foot to push through.
Yeah.
But she kept kind of bending the leg the other way, and it wasn't really like connecting. But the baby was also getting frustrated. So I was like, well, let's take a break. And, but it was a nice, I've done some telehealth visits now because I'm doing contract work, but it was still nice to get more practice because the more you do it, the better. So,
absolutely. And I did not actually watch that video. I should go back and do that. But did you get a chance to kind of reframe what you wanted to say to her?
I did. So then I was like, well, let me show you, one more time, and we can go back to it later if he needs a break. And I felt like I did a good demonstration with the doll. And then once I saw what she was doing, I was like, so not up, go out to the side. And, but I think the problem was that he was also crying a lot and she couldn't hear me. Because even on the video, I really couldn't hear myself. So that's when I was like, maybe if the mom has like some earphones that she can directly hear me, or I need maybe something on my end too, like a microphone, so it could be, I don't know if it would be louder on her end, but I know for recording purposes it would have helped because it was really hard to hear. So maybe with kids that have babies that cry a lot or get fussy, if the parents have a headset or something, that might help.
Perhaps. And I think one, just divided attention for the parent between trying to manage their child to calm down and to attend to what you're saying, whether they had an earpiece or not, it still might not work. So I usually just let the parent, again, give the parent permission to calm your baby down.
Right.
Let's just go ahead and get up and walk around, do what you need to do. If that means that she's not looking directly at the camera while I'm talking or providing feedback, that's okay. Again, would I expect the parent to sit with that crying kid and listen to me in person?
That's true. Yeah.
No. So before I give my instruction or feedback to the parent, I want that child to be in calm and alert so that the parent can be in calm and alert. Because I don't care who you are, whether you're 2 months old or 102 years old, if you're not in a state of calm and alert, you're not able to learn, you're not able to listen. So that needs to always be our focus. But I think that's great to just kind of give back feedback on her. I might also ask the parent to get down on the ground and put herself in a position and see where does she need to push. What would be helpful right now for you to advance forward? if the parent can get a better understanding in their own body, they're going to be able to better assist the child. You know, how many times you go, if you're working acute care and you ask a patient who you're working with, how do you typically get out of bed?
Right.
I don't know. That is a movement pattern that we own, that we no longer put any cognitive effort through.
Right.
So an adult to know how to crawl and to think about what's involved in a commando crawl, that's a movement pattern that is now part of them that they don't, to describe it, they would actually have to put forth some cognitive effort.
Right, that's true. So are you ready for a little game?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to name an age group, and then you have to, and it's just like a kid that's functioning at a specific age group, no matter what age they are, if they're 12 and functioning at a 3-year-old level. So I'm just going to say an age group, and you have 5 seconds to list objects that you would ask the parent to have available during an evaluation. So a kid you've never seen.
Okay.
Did I describe that okay?
I understand.
Okay, so I'm going to set my timer.
Okay.
So first, what objects would you have a parent bring to an evaluation for their child that was functioning at a 4 to 8-year-old level? And a 4 to 8-year-old level.
Okay.
And go.
Puzzles, blocks, cars, a doll.
Time's up. Time's up. Okay.
A lot of ums. They should bring a lot of ums.
Okay, and then the next one is going to be a 0 to 3-year-old level. And go.
Those ring toys, things to chew on, bells or little shakers.
Time's up. Okay. And, oops. Okay, and then 9 to 13 and over age level. And
okay, yoga mat. I don't know.
Okay. So I thought that would be a fun game to play.
Yeah. 5 seconds is not very long.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. And is there anything you want to add to any of those lists?
I think, even in home, one of the things that keep coming up, what about families who don't have toys? And I hope this doesn't come off condescending, but what do you think the families are doing when you're in person in clinic or in home and you leave and they don't have toys? What are you asking them to use at that point?
That's true. I didn't think about that.
So I totally understand that everybody is at a different socioeconomic level, and there are absolutely families who don't have money to provide toys for their children, but yet we still need to find ways developmentally appropriate to help this child right now. The child can't get up and get their own toys, and we expect that the family's engaging with them and playing with them. So what is your education in person or online to help match that, to help kind of get what both of us need? So thinking about that, and if that is a question that you still don't have an answer to, get on my Pinterest board.
Yeah, it's funny because even with kids where their parents do have the money to buy them toys, the kids always go towards cardboard boxes and Tupperware anyways. People are like, I spent so much money on toys, and they just want to play with household items. So.
Yes. And I think if we think about that, there's a reflex called the Pavlov orientation reflex. And that's a reflex that we have innately in our body to help us learn about things and be curious about things. So why wouldn't the child be interested about things that they see every day, things that they see mom and dad using? Mom and dad aren't playing with these toys that they have in the toy box. Mom and dad are playing with the pots, the pans, the boxes in the cupboards. So yeah, get out some plastic tumblers to have the kid play with. If a kid isn't putting a lot of things in their mouth, cut up pictures of magazines or maybe old books, and let's divide them into categories. Let's divide them by the letter sound that they make. So we can. I've done things out of cardboard boxes where I've like made little monster faces, and we're going to feed the monster. You can look on Pinterest and do things like that, like making a little washing machine or making a little oven, and you can use maybe pieces of fabric or felt if you have it to make some play food. So things that we have around our house, we can think a little bit about how we might be able to turn this into a play activity or a toy, and is it going to be exactly like what you're typically using? No.
So that was great information. Thank you for that. And I haven't checked out your Pinterest yet, so I'm going to have to go on there. So I know that you do have some, you just launched a Pediatric Telehealth Toolbox. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I have to kind of laugh a little bit because back in January of this year, I was about to close all of this stuff down. I felt like there was really not much interest about pediatric telehealth, and I don't want to say getting frustrated, but I just felt like maybe my energy and time was better served someplace else. And I even asked the members of my group who would like to take this over from me. And nobody answered.
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, I know, I guess like that, the energy, the universe is telling me something. So then when all of this happened and I was like, well, we have information to give people. And so I just started posting videos, and really, truly, I mean, that is still what I want to do. I want to help provide education and support to therapists in whatever manner. At the same time, doing these videos and recordings do take time and energy from me. And so I just felt like putting it all together in one spot, that even if someone's not on Facebook, that they could access it, would be ideal. And so I do have some paid courses, and then I posted a free course. I'm kind of thinking about, like, I really want to get this information out to people. And yes, you can find a lot of things online on YouTube, and use those resources, absolutely. But if you find that there's something that you are still lacking, let me know, because I'll make a course specifically, because if you're having a question about it, somebody else is having a question too. And I do have those 300 to 400 visits as experience to draw from. So I have no problem to make a course. And I think that if the price point right now is hard to swallow because you're not working, I think I'm going to make some lower cost options that are maybe shorter in length and just give you exactly what you need. And then you can take another one if that's what you need. I really am not here to make like tons of money from this. I just want to provide information out there for people to get started and to move forward.
And then we'll make sure on the comments to put a link. And I think I posted it once before, but we'll make sure it goes with this interview so they can click on it and check out your courses. You also have a YouTube page, Pinterest, and then your Facebook group, right?
Yeah, for sure. So like, I know, I guess, I don't know. I have a strong desire to be very interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. And I guess that comes from the early intervention background that I have. But so really, I know that I'm a physical therapist, and obviously when I'm talking about direct treatment skills and interventions, a physical therapist would be best served to listen to me. But really, a lot of this information that I'm providing is transdisciplinary. No matter what discipline you are, providing an online video visit is going to follow these steps. So I really hope that no matter what provider you are, that you can gain some information from what I'm doing. And then that's why I do have the Peds Therapy Collective, which I am hoping to grow that into more of a mentorship, or maybe a monthly research like Zoom call there's Wired On, the Wired On Collective. Mindy Silva is in New Zealand, and she's doing phenomenal things with this type of collaborative effort. And so taking her kind of as a model or a template, I wanted to recreate that for all disciplines, specifically early intervention, just because that's kind of where I sit. But really bringing us together as clinicians and supporting each other, particularly because Colorado has a primary service provider model, and maybe other states out there do use that too, where you have one main provider who is continuing to push in the strategies of the other providers that come in at a lower frequency. Well, in order to do that, you need to know what those other providers are looking at, and how you're meshing that together with what you're doing in your own role. And so I really wanted to support therapists in that way. So the Peds Therapy Collective is there for that purpose. And then the Pediatric Telehealth Toolbox, I feel like, is just a really good way to support all providers in the realm of telehealth.
And the Peds Collective, is that on that website? That's also where they'll find the Pediatric Toolbox? Is it kind of?
Mm-hmm. So the Peds Therapy Collective right now sits on Facebook. Okay. But again, there's a lot of clinicians who don't want to be on Facebook. So it is inside the Pediatric Telehealth Toolbox right now as a standalone course. As far as it's right now, it's listed as a $5 per month membership, so that you can come on and do the Zoom call with me, get some emails, and kind of have that collaboration that way. So we'll see where it goes. Right now, I don't have anybody signed up for that right now, but I just put it out last Sunday. So
yeah, okay, awesome. And so let's see, I think those, oh yeah, so I did have on the toolbox or in your courses, at one point you had commented on one of my posts about, you could show pictures or video clips to help if you can't demonstrate it, or if they're the parents of better learner that way. And you mentioned that you have some files on your computer that you use. Are those available to therapists, or are you going to put that as part of your courses?
Yes, a lot of these I've been trying. So Pinterest, I used to just pin other people's posts. And then more recently, I've been starting to pin my own resources. So I'm in that beginning stage, but if you look at the Pediatric Telehealth Resource Board that I have, or the Therapeutic Exercise Exchange, I'm trying to post on there wherever the activity might be most appropriate. So I don't know, it does take a lot of time to kind of create that resource. So it's kind of a slow go as far as.
And so on the comments, I'll post the links that you sent me, but if I'm missing any, like that therapy exchange, is that on Pinterest?
It's on Pinterest. So if you follow Sweet Pea Pediatric Wellness, you can see my other boards. So I've got 2 boards, but I can see who comes through and who follows me. So maybe you might have like another board that I have.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. You've provided us with a lot of great info. I'm glad that, when you had the dry spell in telehealth, that you didn't give up, because we really need your information and expertise now to help us all through this telehealth journey.
Yes, absolutely.
I have a fun question. So at first I was going to ask you, if you had to be any animal, what animal would you be and why? But now, since I'm calling this the Pediatric Telehealth Coffee Hour, I'd like to ask a different question. How do you drink your coffee?
Okay, this is cool. This is good. I drink my coffee with some blended butter or ghee and cinnamon.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm gonna have to try that.
Yeah. So yeah, I would prefer to use the ghee, but sometimes I don't always have it on hand. So then I'll take some organic unsalted butter.
And is there any other information that you want to end the interview with?
I think just get out there and do this. If you have some reservations, if you haven't yet had a telehealth session, go ahead and acknowledge that you have some reservations, that you have some doubts. I know it might sound kind of corny or hokey, but get out a piece of paper and write down what is holding you back from taking this step and trying this service delivery method. It is not a different service. It is exactly the same service that you provide in person. It may look a little bit differently as far as how it needs to be delivered, and that is essentially the issue. So if you write down your concerns about or beliefs as to why this isn't going to work out for you or why this isn't going to work out for certain families, walk away from that piece of paper, go talk with a friend if you need to, come back after a couple of hours and see if you have even one solution to any of those barriers. Just start to kind of chip away at some of these false beliefs, and that would be my recommendation.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate your time and coming to hang out with us this morning.
Likewise.